Namaste, and welcome back. My name is Abke, and today's episode of Spiritual Intelligence is all about understanding the SQ test and determining what your SQ score is. As we discussed in the last two episodes, every chakra represents a different level of spiritual intelligence, and attaining the state of mastery is all about learning how to unlock and activate these different levels of spiritual intelligence that exist within us. So the SQ test that you're going to be going through today is not going to be anything like an IQ test, where you sit down and take a series of questions and then are given an exact score. The SQ test is much more of a test in self-knowledge and self-awareness. We're going to be taking you through each chakra level and explaining what that level of spiritual intelligence looks like, how it's transcended, and the different qualities and catalysts that exist at that level, so that you can determine and discover where your current SQ range is, in addition to what practices are going to help you to begin moving to the next level. So I'd like to invite you to join me in this third episode of Spiritual Intelligence as we explore the SQ test. So before we dive into the SQ levels, I want to clear up a couple of important points. Anytime that you put numbers to something, the spiritual ego has a tendency to get involved. So my first disclaimer is that the SQ test is not in any way a value judgment. Your SQ is not an estimation of your self-worth. Your worth is immeasurable and eternal. Your SQ score is just an indication of what spiritual lessons that your soul is currently trying to learn. So all levels of SQ are equally valid and equally important. But when you know the map of the territory that you're traveling, it can make the journey a whole lot smoother. Secondly, we're all at different levels or stages of our spiritual development. And so understanding where you are and how to integrate the lessons at your current level is the entire purpose of the SQ test. And some people say that anytime you put numbers to something, it's always just the ego and you should never do it. And while I do agree that the spiritual ego definitely has a tendency to grab onto numbers, just like anything else, I don't find that to be a convincing enough reason to shy away from using them. Because everything in the universe can ultimately be boiled down to math and numerology. Because everything in the universe, consciousness included, is the expression of divine intelligence. So math and numbers are not inherently an egoic thing. In fact, numbers are divine, and they're meant to be used as a teaching device. And that's exactly the purpose that we're going to be using them for here. Thirdly, there will inevitably be someone who asks, since you're calling it spiritual intelligence, are you saying that people with a low SQ score are spiritually stupid? So I want to address this question before it gets asked. And the answer to the question is a resounding no. The term stupid applies to intellectual intelligence or linear intelligence, and SQ is nonlinear intelligence. So somebody may have a low SQ score and be a brilliant mathematician or physicist at the same time, and nobody would consider that person stupid. So linear intelligence is about one's ability to process information and solve puzzles and arrive at conclusions through deductive reasoning. Whereas SQ, or nonlinear intelligence, is about how many variables one can be aware of simultaneously. So it's about capacity, not processing. So there's no such thing as stupid on the SQ chart. Someone is either aware of something or unaware of it. So with those few things cleared up, let's begin to move now into the 7 energy centers and begin learning what each level of SQ looks like. And in order to help you accurately determine your SQ range, I'm going to be giving you 2 sections for each SQ level. On the right side of the screen will be the positive and negative qualities of that level. And please understand that this does not mean good and bad qualities. We're using these words in their truest sense of polarity. And the negative polarity is magnetic, or that which draws into itself. And the positive polarity is radiating or illuminating. It is that which moves outwards or gives of itself. So a negative quality represents something that causes stagnation at this level. And a positive quality represents something that causes progression or forward momentum at this level. Remember, when it comes to the SQ chart, there is either stagnation or progression, but there is no regression of one's SQ. And this is because of the nature of awareness. Once you're truly aware of something, it's impossible to ever become truly unaware of it ever again. In the same way that you cannot rewatch a movie that you just watched and have the same exact experience. So when it comes to the SQ test, negative means stagnation, positive means progression. And then on the left side of the screen are going to be the points for integration at this level. This section shows the sadhana, or spiritual practices and disciplines required to integrate and transcend the lessons given at this level of SQ. Remember in episode 1, we said that spiritual intelligence is one's capacity for self-awareness and integration. So on the right side of the screen are the things to be aware of at each level, and on the left side of the screen are the things to integrate at each level. So now that you understand how the SQ test works, let's go ahead and dive into it. The lowest state of spiritual intelligence is insanity, which correlates to the root chakra. This SQ range is between 1 and 50, and the identity at this level is I am the body, which represents the lowest level of awareness. The root chakra contains the energies of survival and sexuality. So when the root chakra is left alone and is not endowed with any of the intelligence from the upper 6 chakras, it is a very distorted and painful state of SQ. The obstacles at this level are the extreme and constant suffering and strong addictions to stimulation. Someone at this level is not even interested in personal development yet, because they're too busy just trying to make it through the day and to fill the aching void that they feel inside. Partying, drinking, drugs, and all kinds of thrill-seeking is what the mind is interested in at this level, which is why people at this level suffer from extreme depression, anxiety, and self-loathing. There is total identification with the body, which creates a deep victim consciousness. A person's belief at this level is that all of my problems are everyone else's fault, because the world is just bad and evil, and I am its victim. So someone at this level is basically just living in survival mode. And the catalysts out of this range are actually the chasing and acquiring of those pleasures and thrills, because it will give the soul the experience that it needs to realize that nothing outside of itself can ever lead to happiness. This is the most important lesson to learn at this SQ level. Somebody at this SQ also finds great pleasure in revenge and getting even, which will also teach them about forgiveness and humility. The integration at this level is to begin learning how to see things differently, to be more open-minded. One has to become sick and tired of being a victim all the time. That is the first step towards personal growth and empowerment. So practicing awareness of one's thoughts and feelings is extremely important at this level. Learning that one does not have to say or do everything that comes into one's mind, or to make a huge deal about every emotion that is felt. This begins to open up space and allows awareness to begin healing. And most importantly of all, transcending this level of SQ requires one to desire to escape from their own insanity and suffering. The next level of SQ is Sanity, which correlates to the sacral chakra. This SQ range is between 51 and 75, and the identity at this level is I am the person. This is the range where one becomes interested in personal development. It may look like wanting to have a successful career, relationship, or to make a name for oneself. But it begins at the point where one realizes that their state of consciousness can be improved, and they aren't just a total victim to the world. So the negatives or obstacles at this SQ level are still the severe levels of suffering. But the desire for personal development becomes a kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and something hopeful to focus on, whereas the root chakra level has no such hope. There are still moderate addictions at this level, but that energy is somewhat absolved by the focus on personal improvement. There's also still a strong body identification, but at this level, one's attention turns to who they are as an individual. Because this level is all about achieving outcomes, a person at this level will experience lots of stress and frustration. But the positives or catalysts at this level are that one begins to have some awareness of their inner world and may even begin practicing things like positive affirmations. But there's no real interest in spiritual practices yet, like meditation. The obsession with personal gain and status also brings the soul many powerful and important lessons, which will give it some forward momentum towards the solar plexus. The integration at this level requires one to learn discipline and self-responsibility for their life. Developing an interest in spirituality and self-empowerment will quickly accelerate one to the solar plexus. Practicing not just observing, but questioning one's thoughts and feelings is critical at this level, because one needs to become aware that everything they think and feel is not necessarily true or reliable. At the root chakra level, the desire is, I just want to survive through the day. At the sacral level, it is, I just want to improve myself. And at the solar plexus level, the desire is, I want to realize my full potential. So desiring what exists at the next SQ level is always an important way to transcend the current level. The next SQ level is empowerment, and it correlates to the solar plexus chakra. This SQ range begins at 76 and ends at 100, and the identity is, I am the mind. The negatives here are moderate but tolerable amounts of suffering, some addictions to stimulation, and moderate body identification. This range is all about one's relationship to others and the world, as well as learning about the power of the mind to create reality. So jealousy and unworthiness are the emotions that can cause the most stagnation at this level. This SQ range is where people become interested in religion and spirituality, typically through law of attraction and self-empowerment teachings, like, you can do anything you put your mind to. Your only limit is what you can believe. Or see it, believe it, achieve it. This kind of thinking is very attractive to people at this level, which opens up the door to real spirituality. But it's also the level where the spiritual ego is born. But the spiritual ego is actually one of the positives in this range, because it means that one will be highly interested in spiritual learning and growth. And as the ego becomes more empowered at this level, it becomes a great catalyst for evolution. But if the spiritual ego gets too inflated, it can also become a negative. Another catalyst at this level is that one begins to fall in love with the idea of creating their own reality, and will typically gravitate strongly towards teachings on the power of thought and manifestation. There's also a strong desire to have healthy and strong relationships, which teaches one self-awareness. As the awareness of one's inner world grows stronger at this level, one will be drawn to spiritual practices like yoga, astrology, and meditation. The integration required at the empowerment level is to reach for the qualities of love, learning to forgive and understand people rather than judging them, and developing an interest in doing inner healing and shadow work as a means of manifesting a better life. Practicing the awareness of one's limiting beliefs is very helpful at this level, but the desire to experience love is the most important of all. A big percentage of the SQ chart is derived from the teachings of the Law of One, and what we've just gone over is what the Law of One calls the primal rays, or the lower three chakras. And these are the energy centers where we do our healing and balancing and shadow work. But we're now about to move into the upper 4 spiritual rays. And there is a bit of a difference in the way that you gauge progress between the primal rays and the spiritual rays. As you've seen, the lower 3 SQ ranges, or chakras, measure progress mostly by showing you what the experience is like at that level, what we suffer from, and what we desire. But beginning from the heart and moving upwards, suffering disappears from the equation. So as you're about to see, the upper 4 SQ ranges are measured more by what falls away at those levels, or what you stop experiencing. So with that being said, let's continue. The next SQ level is awakening, which correlates to the heart chakra. This SQ range begins at 101 and ends at 125, and the identity is I am everything. This level of SQ represents a huge leap that very few people ever make within a human lifetime. When someone is at this level of SQ, they are truly going through a spiritual awakening. This level of SQ represents the awakening to the reality of love and oneness. The negatives at this level are very little compared to the previous. There is still some infrequent suffering here, but the biggest challenge the awakening level brings is the dark night of the soul, where one must meet all of their inner demons and heal them once and for all. Some people can get stuck here for years or even decades, but as the reality of oneness is seen, there is little to no addiction left to sense pleasures, because the soul has found a much greater pleasure than anything the world has to offer. And because of the empathy and sensitivity developed at this level, one can also become overwhelmed by the suffering of the world, which can lead one to martyrdom, or serving others at the expense of oneself. But the biggest positive at this level is that for the first time, one becomes a lover of reality. People at this level will have a strong interest in service to others, in helping to heal the world of suffering, ending corruption and injustice, and creating positive change in the world. And these are very important catalysts for the soul. There's also a huge amount of joy and happiness experienced at the level of the heart, as emotions like gratitude and compassion become one's default nature. The integration needed at the awakening level is to practice detachment and dispassion, because the desire to be of service to others can lead to martyrdom and over-involvement in things that are ultimately outside of one's control. And so one must begin to learn the wisdom that the throat chakra brings. Cultivation of inner silence is tremendously helpful towards this, as well as the desire for inner peace and equanimity towards life. And since the throat chakra represents the first state of mastery, the I am state, practicing mind-heart coherence will also greatly accelerate someone towards the next SQ level. Now, the vast majority of people watching this video likely fall under one of the last 4 categories that we've just gone over. But even if you're absolutely certain that you fall into one of these 4 categories, please continue to learn the next 3 SQ levels as well. Because remember, what we're aiming for is this state of mastery. And the first of the 3 states of mastery begins at the throat chakra level, which is the state called illumination. This is the state that most refer to as enlightenment, which the Buddha classified simply as the end of suffering. So one may not achieve super consciousness or God union at this level, but they do achieve the total transcendence of psychological suffering. This is perhaps the easiest way to know if one has reached a 150 SQ or not. At 150 and beyond, suffering is no longer experienced, because the mind is fully illuminated from the shadows of duality. This is why one must practice radical detachment and dispassion in order to awaken this inner light, because any clinging or resisting of the world represents that one is still seeing with duality. The Bhagavad Gita describes this level of SQ perfectly in chapter 5, verse 24. Those who are happy within themselves, enjoying the delight of God within, and are illuminated by the inner light, such ones are united with the Supreme and are liberated from material existence. This is the level of Buddhist monks and yogis. So the negatives of this SQ range are the tendency to get lost in emptiness. Oftentimes, people who practice long periods of meditation can get lost in the enjoyment of being so detached from the world. But this detachment also must be overcome. There is also an extreme sensitivity to untruthful and unloving thoughts, which can be challenging for some to navigate through. But the positives of this level are many. As one transcends the pair of opposites, they also transcend suffering altogether. This is why the identity at this level is, I am nothing. The world begins to appear as a kind of waking dream. It is still seen as beautiful and divine, but one begins to realize that they are formless and nameless. There is absolutely no desire for sense pleasures at this level, which is another easy barometer for this SQ range. Someone in this range finds that they are strongly pulled towards inner silence, emptiness, and constant self-examination. So the quality of consciousness at this level is very peaceful and equanimous. There is only a tiny, almost undetectable thread of body identification left, and those strings will soon be cut for good at the third eye level. The illumination state also allows one to achieve the first state of samadhi, called Savikalpa Samadhi. This is a kind of God absorption achieved in deep meditation, where thoughts can still be present, but are easily ignored. The integration for this SQ range is to begin observing the movement of the I thought, the subtle tendency of the mind to identify with every thought, feeling, and action. Awareness must firmly catch hold of the I thought in order to transcend this SQ range. Contemplating the nature of the self will also bring one closer to the all-consuming silence of the third eye. And the practice of living in the flow state, or non-doership, will also move one closer to the full state of mastery. And lastly, one must have an intense desire for self-realization. Otherwise, the bliss of emptiness can keep one trapped at this level for a very long time. And finally, we come to the state of mastery, which is the SQ range of 151 to 175. And the identity is, I am the self. This is the level of self-realization, the level of the great sages like Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta. It would be difficult to describe the experience at this level if it were not for the writings of the great masters of Tibet and India, who have done a noble job at describing it. The obstacles at this level are the tendency to pursue siddhis, or spiritual powers, which begin to manifest in incredible ways. One can get too focused on cultivating siddhis and lose focus of the ultimate prize of God union. One may also have a difficult time with the indescribable bliss of samadhi, which one can easily access at this level. Many people who achieve this level disappear for years, some of them hiding in caves, stuck in deep states of samadhi for weeks at a time. The positives of this level is that one only experiences oneself, and so there is a virtually constant state of bliss that is experienced within. This level of SQ has the capacity to sustain enormous amounts of energy, as the Kundalini has been fully awakened and psychic gifts begin to flow effortlessly. This is also the level of non-doership, where one feels as though the body is just a puppet of the divine power, as one now lives in a flow state permanently. Other catalysts at this level include the training of disciples and pointing people towards the self. This state also allows someone to access the second state of samadhi, called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, all of the mental faculties are completely absorbed into the bliss of divine union. Sages in Nirvikalpa Samadhi can sit silently with their eyes open for hours, unaware of anyone speaking to them or even touching them. A person in this state has no need or impulse to speak unless it is for the benefit of others, as there is absolutely no personal self left. According to the Yoga Sutras, the Vedas and Upanishads, to transcend the third eye requires substantial experience of the void, as well as learning to stabilize and control the samadhi state. Learning to master the channeling state will also take one to the crown, as well as an all-consuming desire for God union. And lastly, we come to the final frontier, where very few have been and where there is very little to report. This is the singularity state, which begins at 176 and goes well beyond 200. There is no identity but God at this level, or the I within the I, spoken of in many ancient scriptures, including the Bible. At this SQ level, one basically becomes God incarnate. One speaks like a God and is seen by others to be God. Many of the famous I am statements of Christ give us a glimpse for what this quality of consciousness is like. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I and my Father are one. Miracles follow these beings wherever they go, as well as many different kinds of cities or supernatural powers. These beings will also typically have disciples as well, and often travel more than someone at the previous SQ level. These beings live in the third state of samadhi, called Sahaja Samadhi. Sahaja means natural in Sanskrit, and this is a state of God absorption that one reaches once they have mastered the previous two levels of samadhi and has learned how to stabilize in those states. There's nothing known of how to transcend this level, because we have no knowledge of what is beyond this level. In the Law of One, Ra calls this state opening the gateway to intelligent infinity, and describes this achievement in sessions 48 and 49. Meanwhile, the Creator lies within. In the North Pole, the crown is already upon the head, and the entity is potentially a god. The entity who penetrates intelligent infinity is basically capable of walking the universe with unfettered tread. So now that we've gone over each of the 7 levels of the SQ chart, let's talk about how to determine your SQ range accurately. The numbers over each chakra on this chart represent the highest level or activation of that chakra, and the range begins where the previous chakra leaves off. So for instance, the root chakra SQ range is between 1 and 50. The sacral SQ range is between 51 and 75, and so forth up the entire chart. So based upon the negatives and positives given for each SQ level, you can begin determining where you think your SQ range might be. So if you're experiencing more of the negative qualities of any given SQ range, then you know that means you're likely somewhere near the lower end of that SQ range. And remember, negative doesn't mean bad, it means stagnation. But once you begin to raise your SQ level, you start to experience more of the positive qualities of that level. And remember, positive doesn't mean good, it means progression or catalyst. So the big distinction is that in the lower 3 chakras, you know you're moving towards the top end of the SQ range when you experience more and more of the positive qualities. But for the upper 4 SQ ranges, full activation of that level means that you experience none of the negatives and only the positives. So if you believe you might be in the level of the heart chakra or the awakening state, and you read the SQ chart for that state and you say, I'm experiencing none of these negative qualities and all of these positive qualities, then you know that means you are at least at a 125 SQ. And you might want to begin studying the next SQ chart to see if you might be beginning to move into that level. So you can begin to study each one of these 7 SQ levels now and start to get a feel for where your SQ range might be based upon the criteria given. And this is why the SQ test requires real self-honesty and self-investigation, because only you can determine the right answer. No one else can do it for you. And it is important to determine your SQ range accurately if you want to take advantage of the tools that you'll be given throughout this series. Because each one of these SQ ranges comes with specific practices and focuses and disciplines for you to follow in order to most efficiently raise your SQ above that level. So the bottom line is, If you're pretending to be somewhere that you're not, then it's just going to cause a lot of stagnation because you won't be focusing on the areas that are most applicable to your current level. Now, it's true that any of the practices given for any SQ range can be beneficial to one's growth, but it just may not be as relevant to where you currently are or the best possible use of your time and energy. One of the biggest mistakes people make in their sadhana is biting off more than they can chew and holding themselves to a standard that they just don't have the capacity for yet. And this will leave someone feeling unworthy or self-defeated. So for instance, if you think your SQ score is in the low 120s, but it's really in the low 80s, and you expect yourself to be non-judgmental towards others, that may be a little bit more than you're ready for, because in the low 80s, judgments towards others will still arise, and there's nothing you can do about it, because it's just a byproduct of that SQ range itself. In closing, I realize that for some of you, this was a lot of new information. So if it feels that way, that's perfectly all right. Take your time and study each one of these 7 SQ levels, and pretty soon you're going to start to get a feel for the evolution of consciousness as it moves through each level of spiritual intelligence in the 7 energy centers. And when you know the map, it makes the territory a whole lot less intimidating and a whole lot more exciting. As I said last week, there is no greater joy or fulfillment that one can have than devoting yourself to the highest purpose of a human lifetime. The greatest adventure of all is to discover and experience the universe of your own self, to attain self-mastery, a fully illuminated consciousness in union with its creator. Each one of us has this potential within us, but the question is, who will unlock this potential and unleash it on the world? In our next episode, we're going to be looking at the science of human brainwave states, discovering their SQ ranges, and showing you how you can use biofeedback and brainwave monitoring to accelerate your meditation practice and raise your SQ level. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next episode of Spiritual Intelligence. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. I hope that you were truly blessed by it. And I wanted to let you know that I'm really excited to now be partnering with an amazing conscious supplement company called ORGANIFI. A lot of you know that I'm also passionate about holistic health and nutrition, and ORGANIFI has been a staple in my daily health routine for a very long time. They make the most delicious, organic, and high-quality superfood products that I've ever come across. And as you know, a healthy body is a great benefit for spiritual growth, because the health of your body directly translates to the health of your mind. Everything is connected. So feeding your body with high vibrational superfoods straight from the earth is one of the best ways to create that environment for a healthy mind. But getting all the superfoods that your body needs in one day can admittedly be a little bit tough. And that is where ORGANIFI can add a ton of value to your life. I personally start every day off with green, which is ORGANIFI's really delicious blend of 11 superfoods like ashwagandha, chlorella, and moringa. And then in the middle of the day, I'll usually have a scoop of red, which is a delicious energy blend full of 13 adaptogens and antioxidants from berries to recharge your mind and body with a delicious blend of organic superfoods. Your body is an amazing organic machine, but it needs the right fuel and signals to function at its best. And red is full of adaptogens sourced from organic herbs and medicinal mushrooms. And these are compounds that balance hormones, prime your energy pathways, and alleviate stress. So instead of crushing your adrenal system with huge doses of caffeine every day, adaptogens work with your body and give you natural, sustained energy all throughout the day. What's most important to me though about ORGANIFI is the way that they go above and beyond to ensure the cleanest and purest ingredients in all of their products. They are USDA certified organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, certified glyphosate-free, and absolutely zero fillers. So I never go anywhere without ORGANIFI, and I never miss a day without taking it. And ORGANIFI is offering a super generous discount of 20% off of your entire order when you use the coupon code Abke at checkout. So if you want to upgrade your health regimen with ORGANIFI, you can click on the link in the description box below to learn more about all the amazing products that they offer. And I promise you that your mind and your body are going to thank you for it.